but I'm Eliza Leone. I'm the dietitian with Restaurant Associates, and Chef Edgar just introduced himself off camera, but Chef Edgar, I'll let you introduce yourself one more time.
All right.
Here's a short version.
My name is Edgar Ramirez, and I'm one of the chefs at the Elements Cafe. And let's do some cooking. I'm gonna be happy to show you guys.
This is our guest chef tonight. Our chef Raul had to participate in a cooking competition today, so Chef Edgar stepped in, and we're going to be doing this class together. So what we are doing today is, for this quarter, we're focusing on sustainability as our theme, which sustainability really works its way into all of our recipes. But with this quarter specifically, with April being Earth Month, and with today specifically being Stop Food Waste Day, which is an annual observance that was actually created by our parent company, Compass Group, as a way for us to reduce our food waste around the world. We're trying, the goal for our company is to reduce our food waste by half by 2030. And this goal was started in 2017. So we are well on our way already. That's, we always find in our cafes on campus, we always find ways to reduce our food waste when it comes to reducing the trimmings that we, cut off of vegetables, as we're going to show you tonight in some of our food preparation. And we also find creative ways to use those trimmings. And we also, whatever food we have left over in our cafes, we always donate to local organizations that come and pick that up from us. So we reduce our food waste in any and every way we can. But for tonight, the recipe that we're making is a spring minestrone soup. So this has some pasta, it's got cannellini beans, lots of different veggies. The dominant color here is green for spring. And we've got a decent amount of these veggies are also in season right now. So it's going to be a nice fresh soup. And we're also serving it with a green pea and goat cheese crostini with some mint mixed in as well, some fresh mint. So it's going to be a nice, like toasty, crunchy, like bread slice on the side to dip in your soup at the end. So our learning objectives for the class are to understand the nutrition and sustainability benefits of local and seasonal produce. Also to become familiar with different ways to make your meals more sustainable. I'll be touching on that throughout the class. We're going to talk about the vegetables that are in season right now, and also learn some different ways to make your meals more sustainable. And make your plant-forward meals more satisfying as well. So just to quickly go over some safety points and our plan of work at the top of the class. So safety, we, as always, we're working with sharp knives and hot pans. So just be careful, make sure you have a pot holder close by for when you're handling hot things. Make sure your knife is in a safe place so you don't knock it off the counter by accident or anything like that. And also, because this is a vegetarian recipe, safety-wise, we don't have very many potentially hazardous ingredients. We don't have to like handle our chicken carefully or something like that. We just have cheese, and all of the other ingredients are vegan. So that makes it much easier for us. But also do know that it's incredibly important to wash your produce before you use it, to wash your hands throughout the process. And when this meal is done, when you have leftovers, make sure you let the soup cool down to room temperature before you put it in your refrigerator, so it doesn't stay in that temperature danger zone for too long. So our plan of work for the class, we're going to be prepping first some of the items that we're using. If you see in the recipe, we had some of the ingredients were bolded. That's because those ones we wanted to show you like different ways to use these ingredients so that you can have multiple uses for them. So we're going to show you that right off the bat. And then we're going to start the soup. We're going to brown the ingredients a little bit, caramelize them, let that simmer. Then we will make the crostini and stick that in the oven. And then we're going to finish off the soup, and the crostini will come out, and it'll be all good to go. And throughout, we'll be throwing in some different education points. I have some slides to share since this recipe is very quick and easy. So yeah, we'll just be throwing in some good information throughout the class. So I will now pass it over to Edgar, and he can get us started with showing us how to prep some of the different ingredients, the produce items that are in this soup. So I just added the spotlight, so now we can see your hands.
Okay. All right, so we have celery. So first I'm gonna do the ribbons, and then I'm gonna dice it up so I can use the whole thing. So I usually use like a pillar.
So doing these ribbons is just a cool way to like add a little extra garnish flair at the end. And we've seen this in some of our other classes where Chef Raul has, I think it was in the last class, where he had a bowl of ice water and he put, that's
Yes.
exactly what Edgar's doing here. He
It's
put those ribbons
the
in
key.
ice water. And
That one.
because it helps them kind of curl up a little bit. So it just makes for a more aesthetically pleasing garnish in the end.
And we can dice this one so we can have it as well.
It's also, if you're noticing the technique that Edgar is using with, you know, all chefs are trained to slice things in the most efficient way. So it's cool to see the consistency between Raul and Edgar, that they both know the best way to dice things up, which is to cut them into strips first and then line them all up and quickly dice them. It's just much more efficient that way.
Okay, so we got our celery.
All right.
And do our asparagus. So this is a really actually really good point. Like this is how we get our asparagus in any store. And half of the asparagus, sometimes we throw it out because this part, it gets a little chewy. So what people usually do is just cut it. But for food waste, and you know, you don't want to like spend too much money, I guess, and you can still eat this part. The only way, like you have to get it, like peel it a little bit, and then it will be tender. So I'm gonna show you guys. I'm gonna do one. I'm gonna do ribbons too. This one's. I'm gonna put it in ice water. And over here, I'm just gonna peel this part. So from here to here is more tender, but this part, it gets like a little chewy. But if you peel it, you'll be just fine.
Yeah, so that's like a third of the asparagus that you would typically just cut off and get rid of.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not necessary at all.
So can I ask, so remind me what's the cold water for again?
The cold water makes it's more like Eliza said, we use it for garnish. So if you put it in cold water, it's gonna curly up. So we'll give a dish of presentation better. You can do carrots, you can do any vegetable. The only thing you have to be like slice it really thin.
Okay.
So at the end, like if you leave it for like 5 minutes, it comes out really curly, and it's actually really cool. A lot of people do like scallions as well. If you slice it really thin, and then we'll put it right here, it will be perfect curly.
Ah, okay. So yeah, I always take the ends of my asparagus and throw them out. So by doing this, by peeling it like that, you're saying that when you cook the asparagus, it should still be very tender?
Yes. So the what makes it chewy, because as you know, like the first part of the when asparagus grows is this part. So it's like a tree, right? The hardest part is the bottom of the tree. So It's the same thing with the asparagus. but it's the skin that makes it the toughest. But if you take the skin off, and then you get a nice crunchy asparagus like the rest of this part, so you don't really waste anything.
Okay.
And this part, so this we're gonna do in bites, but this part it cooks really quick.
Mhm.
So you don't want this to like, especially for a soup, if you don't want like this to overcook, just set it to the side, and then you add it at the end.
Got it. Okay.
So save those up. And then cut this one with guys.
To touch on the ice water thing also, it's kind of like an osmosis type thing. Like when you have the really thin ribbons of celery or carrot or whatever, and you put it in ice water, you know, it like draws out the water and it causes the
Sure.
the shape of the vegetable to change. It causes it to curl in on itself.
Yeah.
It's losing its own, you know,
Sounds yeah.
thing.
Keeps it crunchy up, right?
Yeah.
Asparagus.
So yeah, the asparagus tops we are setting aside so we can just like put those in as like a little garnish in the end. And the stalks, even the bottoms of the asparagus, we're keeping to cook in the soup.
So the scallions, right? Like a lot of people too. A lot of people just use half of the scallions. And scallions, you can use the whole thing. You know, that literally you can just take this part off, and you can use the entire thing. Because the scallion is actually I love cooking with scallion because they have a really mild flavor. Like it's not as strong as an onion.
Mhm.
So let's use it like in sauces or anything, like even grilled by itself, and it tastes delicious. But for this part, like in food waste, the only part you can just take out it's this part, which is not much, which is the roots.
Mhm.
And then you can just use the whole thing.
So also you'll notice that Edgar is slicing on a bias, which means like diagonal to
Mhm.
the reason. Well, there's a couple of reasons for this. Edgar, correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm missing anything, but I think one of the reasons is that it just looks nicer. And the other reason is that it just, it opens up more surface area of the inside of the vegetable.
Oh, yeah.
So you can just like soak in the sauces and all, whatever else you're using. Is that right, Edgar? Did I miss it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, Edgar, I noticed for this soup, you're mincing everything small. And normally, you know, when I usually make soup, it's like chunky, you know, for longer cooking times.
Yeah. Absolutely. It depends on the soup that you're making, you know. Like this one is a minestrone, so it's kind of like a hottie soup.
Yeah.
But it depends on how size the vegetable do you like. Like when I do soups at home, believe me, and it's like I cut like big dice. Because growing up, for me, it wasn't like a small dice soup. It was chunky. Like when my mom made the soup, it was chunky. Potatoes, celery, carrots, they're all, even the beef himself, when we do like beef soup. But yeah, it depends on how you like it, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is also a really quick cooking soup. So as with anything, whether you're making soup or roasting vegetables or anything like that, the smaller you cut it, the quicker it cooks. So
yeah,
it's definitely a faster soup. You'll see.
Faster
how
cooking
easy
soup,
it
okay.
is.
okay.
And then the final ingredient that we wanted to show a demo of to use different parts of it is fennel. And fennel is kind of like a weird shaped vegetable. It's got like, I mean, you'll see it when he brings it over. There's like the feathery.
It's got hair on it.
You're right, yeah. That's what it looks like. And the bottom just has like all these different, you know.
Yes. It's tricky, but in soup, especially like in the minestrone, it's delicious. Because it gives you like the anise flavor, and it goes really well with the rest of the vegetables.
And I always have to throw away all that hair because I never know what to do with it.
It's tricky, you know, because there's many ways to use it. A lot of people use it for garnishes, but at home, you're right. Sometimes we can't really use it. But if you pickle them, they come very good too. Like you can pickle all this part, just like wash it raw, really nice, and then you can throw it on like a salad or stuff.
Yeah, I've definitely done that on a salad before, but then I go, oh, there's only so much I can use because there's so much of it.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, then
Absolutely.
eventually I end up throwing it out.
I guess it will, you know, you won't feel as bad if using half than like
Yeah.
not using any at all.
That's true.
Right, right. And also like fresh herbs, you know, like basil and parsley and all those things, you can freeze those and throw them into things that you cook. You wouldn't really want to, you know, put it in something where it's raw because it's going to be a different consistencies after it's been frozen. But you could totally chop it up and freeze it and then just mix it into rice or something like that.
Or you can make a nice stock for your soup.
Mm,
You know, like vegetable stock, you can use it on there. So that can also work.
definitely.
Yeah, I've also taken the tops off and then put my oven on its lowest setting to dry them. Because I believe fennel, the top of the fennel is dill. Is that it?
You're asking if the top of fennel is dill?
Yeah,
Those are different things, but they're very, very similar. They look,
yeah.
the texture is the same. They
Yeah.
look the same, but they are slightly different. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So with the fennel, what I do here, I just cut the bottom part. I'll cut it in half. So this part in here, this part needs to come off because it's really tough. As you see it here, it's like the heart. So
Yeah, like
I
the
do.
core of it.
So this is how so I did like a, I don't know,
Like a V
like a
cut.
diamond, yeah, like a V
Yeah,
cut,
yeah,
and then that's how I got it out.
yep. And the fennel with this soup, we're slicing it in a couple different ways. We're gonna do some of it, you know, half of that we'll do as like slices or wedges or something like that. So we have like an interesting shape in the soup. And the other one, we'll just dice it up.
Right. So I got it in half again. If you want to like I can slice it. So we just slice it as thin as you want it or as thick as you want it. It's also gonna, when it cooks, it's gonna just spread apart. So we're gonna have this slice and we can have this one slice.
And those fennel fronds, what we're using them for in this recipe is just as a garnish. So we put those into the ice water as well, just to keep them fresh. And so they'll be with the rest of the garnish. But yeah, that's what we're using it for in this recipe. So out of these veggies that we're using in this soup, the seasonal ones, the ones that are really in season in like April and May, are peas, asparagus, scallions, spinach, and mushrooms, which are coming into the recipe in a little bit. But those are all lots of examples of like, you know, good spring. Aside from the mushrooms, everything is green. So it's just like a pretty green soup with all seasonal ingredients.
All right, so we have all our meat ready.
Perfect. So yeah, while Edgar gets the the induction burner ready to go so we can start the soup, I'm going to share a couple slides real quick. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here and I'll do my slideshow. So yeah, so I had as our, in one of our learning objectives to talk about the benefits of shopping locally. So these are just a few examples. So I just mentioned the produce items that are in this soup that are in season right now. Also, a couple like huge benefits to shopping locally. One is when there are fewer preservatives and like extraordinary measures taken, when you buy food that's grown locally and, you know, just like a few towns over or in your own town or in your state or even just in the Northeast, the food does not have to be shipped as far, which means it doesn't need to have preservatives added and like flash frozen and all this stuff done to it to keep it fresh by the time it gets to you. So it's definitely better that way to keep things closer, buy more local things. And also, of course, it's incredibly important to support small local businesses when we're talking about sustainability and like having a positive impact on the environment and doing our part to help lessen the effects of climate change. Supporting small local businesses is obviously a much better choice than the big corporations that are driving climate change. So if we can support our local farmer, we're definitely making an impact for sure. I'm gonna it looks like Edgar is set up, so I'm gonna stop sharing this and I'll share some more slides in a little bit. And I'm just gonna jump in my spotlight here too. So, all right. So the first thing we're gonna do with this soup is we're gonna heat up our canola oil and then we're gonna add in some of the vegetables that we wanna caramelize. And so Edgar has some good tips on how to best caramelize things. He was just telling me earlier. You wanna tell the class?
Yes. All right, so we're gonna start with a little olive oil, and even if it's a soup, you still wanna use some oil, you know, because sorry, that was canola oil. I meant canola.
That's right. That's right.
So the reason that we use canola oil is because so we'll take the flavor off other vegetables. And it will give you it will cook your vegetable, because to caramelize the vegetable, you need some oil. Otherwise, they will just burn. So we're gonna add onions.
So this is a half a cup of diced onion.
Celery.
Okay, so that was the 2 celery stalks that we diced up before. We'll also have the mushrooms are going to go in. So that's a half a cup of sliced shiitake mushrooms. And when we caramelize those, they're going to give us some good umami flavor. We're also going to add the fennel that we just cut up. So that's going in, the diced and the sliced. And for now, we're just going to spend a little time caramelizing those veggies.
So what do you want in here? You want just like caramelize as much as possible, but not burning, you know? So you can start it in like, I prefer like medium heat. That way you have the control. Because if you do it too high, it's just gonna burn. And then the soup is gonna taste different. The caramelize. Caramelize is, for the best way to caramelize, you have all the vegetables, they all have water. So the water has to come out. And then after the water comes out with the same liquid they have, that's they get caramelized. And that's when all the flavor comes out.
Right, so all all vegetables have carbohydrates. They all have some natural sugars. So when you heat them up, those natural sugars are then kind of like, you know, coming out. And that's when we say caramelized, it really does, they do become sweeter when you cook them. Of course, not like caramel, that would be like impossible, but they get browner and they get sweeter. So that's why we say that. So if you were like, as we've said, this is a very quick soup, but if you were in a rush, you could do it on a higher heat. But like Edgar said, it does change the flavor a bit. So what we want to do is just let that go. Let it simmer for a little.
And I think for going back of the size of the vegetables, I think it honestly, it's the way you wanted to do it. Sometimes if you're like at home, sometimes I have a diced carrots that I didn't use in the meal before, but now I have asparagus on the vine. It can all go together. It's okay. You know, it just, you have to find a way, like what cooks faster and what cooks for longer. So, and then the size of it, the size really doesn't matter because it's a soup, you know, so it's still gonna be delicious.
Right, right. If you were like roasting a bunch of different vegetables on one sheet pan, that I think would matter more, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, like you want, you know, typically you want, if you're doing a mix of vegetables, you want them all to be about the same size. And not all vegetables cook at the same speed either. If you were roasting potatoes versus, you know, kale,
Yeah.
chips or something, like obviously those are going to roast at different rates. Yeah, but in a soup, everything cooks in a liquid. So it just makes it kind of easier. And also by having the fennel in a couple different, you know, sliced and diced in there, we're just changing, we're kind of like providing a variety of textures in the soup, which is something that we always talk about in these classes. That's what makes your meals interesting. One of the many things that makes your meals interesting and satisfying is when you have a variety of textures.
And you try all the techniques for cutting, slice, dice. So
Yeah, yeah.
It's about cooking for me is like about having fun, you know. But if everything is like dice, I'm like, But if you have another way to cut it, like why not? Try it out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. You want it to just be more interesting and more fun.
Exactly. Not like, oh, dice. No. I mean, like, what about if you want to like julienne? Maybe might not work for a soup, but at least I try something different.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? And every recipe is like an experiment, basically, you know. Even though we provide these recipes in the class, we always say that these, you know, you don't need to follow this exactly. If you need the guidance, if you're new with recipe following or new with home cooking, then of course follow the recipes and they'll come out great. But if you are a little bit more experienced and you know that you like things to have, you know, more char to them or something, if you want to roast your veggies longer than we say to roast them, or if you want to add more salt or more pepper, or you'll also see that this soup is pretty hearty, as Edgar mentioned earlier. So the amount of broth that we add, it, you know, it doesn't make it like a really, really liquidy soup. It ends up being heartier in the end. But if you prefer a soupier soup, then add more broth, add a little bit of water, and it'll come out great.
Yeah.
It looks like that's getting nice and browned already. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's getting there. Just trying to get the panel on it.
Yeah, that looks great. And so also, since we have so many vegetables going into this soup, there are some that we are browning in the beginning, as you see here, and there are others that we're adding later. That's because some of them take longer to cook than others. That's because some of them we want to be a brighter green at the end. So we're adding them at the end. The longer you cook these ingredients, the less green they become. They lose some of their color.
I think we're ready to add our wine.
All right. So yeah, we're gonna add some white wine to deglaze. So let's look at our recipe here. 1 cup of white wine. And the deglaze, this is something that we do in many of our classes, and many recipes call for this, but it's such an essential step because when you're browning ingredients in a pan and they get, you get some stuff stuck to the bottom of the pan, which is inevitable, you don't want to lose that. You don't want your food to now be stuck to the pan and now you don't get to eat it because it's stuck. You want to add a liquid like wine or water or broth or something, and it helps to release that stuff from the pan. It doesn't stay stuck. So all that flavor is now brought back into the dish. And wine is a great thing to add because it has so much good flavor on its own. And when you cook it, the alcohol boils off. So you're not actually getting any alcohol in it. It's just the flavor of the wine.
Can I ask, does it have to be like a recent wine, like I've had a bottle sitting in the cooler now for a while that we just haven't used, and it's white wine, and say it's like 3 or 4 weeks old. Does that matter?
Oh, I mean, I guess we use like the driest wine, white wine, because if you put sweet wine, then it might change your taste of your soup.
But this is a dry one, but I'm just wondering like age of the wine, like it's been sitting open.
No, it's fine. If we're cooking, it should be fine.
It should be okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like Eliza just mentioned that the alcohol just cooks off. So what do you want? Just the flavor of the white wine on it.
Okay.
Yeah. I did once hear, I think it was on like one of Anthony Bourdain's shows. He said like, you shouldn't cook with any wine that you wouldn't drink. But like, I also think like, it's not like it's going to go bad sitting in your fridge for a month, and it just gives flavor. Like Edgar said, that's all we really want is the flavor. So
Okay.
we are all about not wasting things.
Right. That's why I'm like, I don't want to throw it, but I also don't want to drink it.
I know. I mean, that might actually be a good way to use up the wine that's been in your fridge for a month.
Yeah,
Cook with it instead of drinking it,
exactly. Yeah.
All right, how's that looking, Edgar?
Good. So yeah. So as you see, it's all cooked off, and then the white wine turned into a different color because that was what Eliza was saying. And on the bottom of the pan is always like a little, like that from the caramelized. It just changed the color, that's all the flavor that you want on your soup.
Yeah, exactly. So now at this point, we're gonna add some other ingredients, and then we're gonna let the soup just like simmer off to the side while we make the crostini. So at this point, we're gonna add our asparagus that we cut up. The asparagus stems. We're gonna keep the tops as the garnish, like we mentioned, but we're gonna put the stems in there. We're gonna do some garlic, and that's a half teaspoon of garlic, but I'm a garlic lover. I might do more. If you love garlic, you can always add as much as you want. We've also got some bay leaves, which are a good soup ingredient. They just kind of like infuse flavor into the soup. And when the cooking is done, then you remove them. And we've also got black peppercorn. You can just do ground black pepper if you'd like, or you can do the whole peppercorns, which will infuse the flavor as well. That's what we're doing in this dish. So that's a half teaspoon of black peppercorn. And we're also, once that stuff is all mixed in, then we're going to add our vegetable stock. So the vegetable stock, we have 1 3/4 quarts. And this vegetable stock is one that we happen to make in-house, but you can just use one that, you purchase, like one in a carton, or you can use like the base that you dilute in water, that kind of thing, whatever works for you. But making vegetable stock is a great way to use up veggie scraps, as Edgar mentioned at the beginning of the class, with the fennel fronds and with anything you cut off of vegetables, even the stuff that you would not eat, you know, like the roots of the scallions, like that kind of stuff. That can all go into a stock.
Absolutely.
So a couple more ingredients. At this step, we're going to add our salt. We're going to do a half teaspoon of salt. But again, the salt that you add depends on the rest of the flavor. So that, you know, depends on how much sodium is in your stock or your broth that you're adding.
Yeah.
So you can judge however much salt you think you should add. And we encourage you to taste as you go. That's, you know, the best way to make it your own by helping the dish fit your personal taste preferences.
Is there any use, Eliza, for the leaves that come with the beets? Like, you know, when you buy beets and they have those leaves attached to the roots.
Yeah,
I always throw those away too.
that's another one that you can definitely like saute those.
They're really good sauteed.
Yeah, they're great. Like and they end up being the texture of like sauteed spinach. They kind of like become tender very quickly. So it's just like a quick saute, like 2 minutes with like garlic and olive oil, and they come out great. You can also blend them into a sauce. You can make like a kind of
like pesto too.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. Yeah. Any type of greens that you find on, you know, carrot greens, beet greens, all those things. You can always blend them up. They all taste slightly different. So as we were saying, you're going to want to taste along and make sure that, you know, you like the flavor. And if it's bitter, then maybe add something sweet, or if it's too salty, then maybe dilute it a little, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's good to know.
The last ingredient we're going to add at this point are the peas that we have in a pod. So we kept some of these just because, again, to add interest. Are those snap peas there?
Yes.
Yeah. So snap peas have a really great texture. You can, of course, they're delicious just raw, but we're putting them in the soup here too.
And this also is optional. We kept them whole because, like Eliza just said, they're delicious as they are. But if you want to like cut them in lines or cut them in half or like slice them up or dice them up, whatever you like, but they work just like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just adds a little bit, you know, different texture, different consistency to the soup by adding something that's a different shape than the other stuff. So now that we've added all of these things, we are going to let this simmer for a little bit, and we're going to make the crostini that's going to be served with this soup. So I can maybe share a slide while Edgar gets situated, and you can like move his equipment around. So since we were talking about green vegetables, I wanted to share some information about, which way do I want to go on my slides? Here we go. So we have lots and lots of green vegetables in this soup tonight. And I wanted to talk about chlorophyll, which is the green pigment. And this is what makes foods green. However, chlorophyll is also present in all plants because it's necessary for photosynthesis. This is how plants live. This is how plants get energy. That's, you know, same thing for your house plants as it is for broccoli. You know, all plants need light, and chlorophyll helps with the photosynthesis process. So even vegetables and fruits that are not green do have chlorophyll in them. Just the other coloring pigments that are present are more, they kind of like overshadow the chlorophyll color. But just some quick benefits, health benefits of green veggies. Green veggies have vitamin K, which is something that, you know, those of you that are clinical professionals are very aware of. When people are on, you know, certain medications, they need to be aware of their vitamin K intake, their green veggie intake. Not that they need to restrict it necessarily, but that it should just be a consistent amount. So if they eat, if your patient likes to eat salad every day, they can keep eating salad every day. It just should be a consistent amount because this affects blood clotting. Vitamin K is essential for blood clotting. So if you have any issues with that, if you're on medications for that and you have wide variety or wide, you know, ups and downs of green vegetables, then that vitamin K can kind of mess with it a little bit. So consistent vitamin K is important. Green veggies also have lots of potassium. I mean, really all vegetables, most vegetables do, but potassium is essential for lowering blood pressure. It's actually been shown that not only is, of course, sodium, reducing sodium is essential for lowering blood pressure, but increasing potassium on its own also helps to lower blood pressure. There are also some important phytonutrients or phytochemicals in green foods. So I've listed a couple of them here. Isothiocyanates are helpful for eliminating potential carcinogens in the body. And sulforaphane, specifically found in cruciferous vegetables, which is like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, bok choy, that kind of thing. That also helps to detoxify carcinogens before they cause damage to the body. So green veggies are incredibly important. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and we'll jump back to Edgar here.
Okay, so here I just add half a cup of goat cheese. And
Yep, and those are frozen peas, right?
the frozen green peas, yes.
Cool. So even if they're straight out of the freezer, you can still put them in this. It's not going to make a difference because they're getting blended up anyway.
Fresh mint.
Fresh mint.
Now I'm gonna blend all this with some olive oil, and I'll show you guys how it comes out.
So the food processor the cord doesn't reach, so he's going to do it behind. And what we're making with the goat cheese, green peas, and mint is a spread that we're going to be putting on some bread, and then we're going to toast it in the oven. So right now the oven is at 350, and we're going to set this up and put it in the oven. And what Edgar did for the bread was he took a baguette, and I'm going to demonstrate with the stapler that happens to be on the desk in front of me. So if this is the length of your baguette, he didn't slice it like this. He sliced it on a bias. He sliced it on a diagonal like this to make long, skinny pieces of baguette. So that's a good way to, we were talking earlier in the class about exposing the greatest amount of surface area. If you sliced a baguette just vertically, you're not going to get very much surface area, but when you slant it and you slice the baguette on a bias, you get a lot of surface area to work with. So there, that spread looks great. So it's nice and thick. It's got some green in it from the peas and the mint. So he also added some olive oil and some salt to that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that's how they slice the bread.
Yep. And so, of course, on our recipe, we said to put, I think we said to spread 1 tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of the mixture onto the bread. That's the quantities of the ingredients that we provided here, but do as much as you like or as little as you like.
I did 2 because I know Eliza want 1 and I want 1 too. So that's what I did.
Thanks. You were right.
If you only do 1, then you have to split only 1.
I know. That is, yeah, at the end of the class, you know, as he's cooking stuff, I know he can smell it. Nobody else is there to smell it, but I know that I'm going to smell it as soon as I walk into the class. So,
Right, so now I'm gonna put it in the oven and give them about 5 minutes. I'll say 350.
yeah, it depends on your oven, but it shouldn't take very long. What you want is just for it to be a little bit browned on the top, and you want it to just be heated through fully. So he's just going to put it on a sheet pan and stick that in the oven. So that's nice and easy. And really at this point, there are some ingredients that we still have not added to the soup, but these are ingredients that don't require a lot of cooking time. Really all they need is to just be heated through. So those ingredients we're going to add when Edgar comes back. And then as soon as the crostini is done toasting, then we're done. This is a very easy soup. So the ingredients that we're going to be adding next include cannellini beans. So we had cannellini beans are a great way to, of course, add protein to this vegan dish. And that's one of the ways that you can also make plant forward meals more satisfying. If they are high, if your plant forward meal is higher in fiber and in protein, then you'll feel just as satisfied as with a, you know, animal product forward meal. Right, you ready to add the final ingredients?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just actually realizing, I think we forgot to put in the pasta. I didn't mention it before. Did you put it in?
No, because I was
Okay,
waiting.
okay. So at this point, you know, we could put in the pasta now and it would be fine. What we did was we chose orzo, which is just what we happen to have in house, but you can use any kind of pasta you want. So maybe at this point, I don't think we'll have enough time to fully cook the orzo, fully cook the pasta. So we should have added the pasta. I missed that step. I apologize. We should have added the pasta when we added the broth, the stock.
I'll just have to say one thing though. If you do add pasta to the soups, just don't put the same amount that you will cook when you're making the pasta. Put less amount because otherwise the pasta is just gonna absorb all the broth. So
Right.
just, you know, like keep an eye on that. It's the same thing if you put rice in the soup, it just absorbs it when it cooks it. So you can cook the pasta separate and add it after, or you can cook it in with the soup, but just remember you have to put the half of the amount that you think you want on the soup, because it's just gonna spread out and then you'll be ended with no broth.
Right.
Which is fine, you can add more broth, but I'm just giving you that as a tip.
Yeah, that's a good tip because there's also so many other things in this soup. We don't want the pasta to then just like take over everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the remaining ingredients aside from the pasta, which we're gonna skip for just the sake of time, we have the cannellini beans, like I just mentioned, so we can add those right now. And we chose cannellini beans. They don't have to be cannellini. They can be any kind of bean. The ones that we're using are canned and they're already cooked. So that's why we're able to add them at the end. We don't need to cook them in the soup. You could also use dried beans if they were already cooked, but at this stage, you would want to be adding them pre-cooked. We're also going to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, I haven't tried it, but it's always keep trying it because you might need more salt or pepper. It depends how you like it, but trying it's very important. That way you know what you're serving it.
Yeah, definitely. And had we added the pasta at this point, because all the veggies that we're adding in the end here all they need is to be cooked through. What determines whether the pasta is done or whether the soup is done is if the pasta is done. If the pasta is done cooking, the soup is done. So we would have added the pasta before we started the crostini, but yeah, so you just keep an eye on the pasta. If you've added that, if you're watching our recording at a later date and you've added the pasta, then your soup is done when the pasta is done. So the other ingredients we're going to add at this point are the remaining green peas. So we also have these fresh green peas. We kept these out to add at this point because we wanted them to stay nice and green. So by adding them at the end, they are going to stay green. They're not going to have that chlorophyll, that green pigment cooked out of them. We've also got spinach, and this fresh spinach we definitely don't need to add until the end because it cooks so easily.
Yes. Sorry.
And then the white parts of the scallions we can add in now, and the asparagus tips as well. So those were ones that we had set aside for a garnish, but those need to be cooked just a smidge so we can put them in the broth at this point.
Yeah.
Or in the soup at this point. And as soon as that's all heated through, it'll be right around the time that the crostini is done. And then our soup will be finished.
And like we said earlier, it depends how much broth you like. This soup has a bunch of ingredients, so you can add more liquid, you can add more like a broth. It depends how you want it. Because the more important part is the flavor, you know. If you're gonna add more broth, taste it again. It might need a little more salt, more pepper. It depends how you like it. Oh, timer's up.
There's the buzzer. The oven's ready. So yeah, you can see the soup, the overhead view, how green it still is. So we started with a lot of green ingredients that got a little bit muted from the color of the stock and from being browned, but we've added more fresh green ingredients at the end. So this is still like a nice, fresh, spring, chlorophyll rich soup. And serving it with this crostini, any soup is better when you have like a toasted crusty bread to dip in it. So this crostini is delicious, and making that spread with the goat cheese and peas, it's a nice like savory, like salty, creamy spread on the crostini.
Okay, so it's done. Let's show you how the crostini came out.
Ooh, that looks perfect. Yeah, nice and toasty.
That's what I see, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Trying to get it in the camera.
I know it's hard to, but yeah, we can see it. We can see
Okay,
it. It's great.
excellent.
The goat cheese is like feta cheese. They don't get like melty. They're not gonna like drip all over the place. They just kind of get soft. So that it stayed where it was put. If we had left it in there, it probably would have started dripping. But all we needed was a few minutes to let it get nice and brown on top. And now Edgar's gonna plate this up.
I'm gonna plate the soup. So put this stuff out of the way.
So I think I'll put us on gallery. And if anybody has any questions about any of the processes that we've done or any of the ingredients we've used, if there are any ingredients here that you're unfamiliar with, can we help you feel more comfortable? Maybe with fennel or fresh peas or anything like that? If you saw the handout that the first page of the recipe document that was sent out with the invite, there was some information about different kinds of peas. So like fresh peas tend to be, they need to be cooked a bit more. Frozen peas are like blanched first, I believe. So they're already like good to go. And they also tend to be smaller. Frozen peas, they are taken from the pod earlier on in their growing stages. So they don't grow as big just yet. And then they're frozen. But fresh peas tend to be bigger because we eat those after they've reached their full growth. So they're definitely bigger. That looks awesome.
Now we're gonna get our curly.
Yep, we've got all the garnishes that we put in the ice water earlier.
Here.
Yeah, look at how curly that got. So cool.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, perfect celery and asparagus ribbons. It's just a good like culinary tip and trick. I've definitely learned a lot working with these chefs here about how to make your food, your presentation, the most appealing that it can be.
That's how I was saying about the scallions. They just also turn curly.
Yeah.
And if you cut it, the thinner they get. I mean, the curly they get. So this here.
Yeah, you can see how everything just like curled up. That's so cool. And it just, adds even more pretty green color on top there. And we've got all the fennel fronds that we can stick in there. They, again, add more interesting texture to this.
I also did the scallion on the vine as well. just give a different presentation.
Mhm. Yeah, so there we go. That's a beautiful soup. I'm gonna pin this really quick just so we can like
Let's see it. Yeah.
all spotlighted. Oh, hold on one sec. How do I do this? Spotlight. Yeah, I'm gonna pin this. Okay, so we can see the soup right there. You see the nice toasty crostini. So also the color of this broth here, this is just how our broth came out. Yeah, that looks awesome. You can see all the different veggies in there. Nice. That crostini looks so good. But yeah, the color of your broth can, it depends on the broth that you buy or the veggies that you put in your own stock that you make. So ours just happened to be a little bit like redder, but yeah, that can just depend on what veggies you use. But yeah, so we've gone a few minutes over. I appreciate you staying. Any questions or anything that we can answer while you guys are still here?
No, I think I have a dinner for next week.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yes, I hope this was helpful for you guys. Like Eliza says, anytime you guys have a question about something that we can cook, just email her, and then we'll be happy
Yes.
to show her how we do our cooking.
Yeah.
Well, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Sure.
you. Thank you for being here. We appreciate
Thanks.
it. All right. And we'll send you the recording, and we hope to see you in future classes again.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Have a good
Have a
night.
great night.
Have a good night.